When we talk about understanding whether a man is truly invested in you, it's easy to get distracted by the loud gestures, the dramatic declarations, the sudden bursts of attention that feel exciting in the moment. But real connection, real commitment, real emotional presence, they don't show up in intensity, they show up in consistency. And that's the first thing I want you to pay attention to, because when a man chooses to be consistent rather than impressive, that's when you know his heart is actually in it. Consistency doesn't mean perfection. It doesn't mean he never makes mistakes, never gets tired, never has days when he's overwhelmed. It means he shows you over and over again that you matter, not just when it's convenient, not just when he wants something, not just when everything is going smoothly. It means he carries the awareness of your presence in his life, even when life gets chaotic. Because a man who cares will always find a way to keep you within the rhythm of his days. Think about the difference between someone who texts you 100 times in one day and then disappears for the next 3, compared to someone who sends you a simple message every morning saying, "I'm here, I hope you're well." That small gesture, repeated over time, is often more meaningful than the dramatic flood of attention that eventually dries up. Anyone can light a fire, but it takes intention, patience, and sincerity to keep that fire warm every single day. And that's where the psychology becomes clear. Intensity is emotional impulsiveness. Consistency is emotional maturity. A man who is consistent isn't trying to impress you, he's trying to include you. He isn't trying to win you temporarily, he's trying to weave you into his life. He's not performing, he's participating. And participation, that steady involvement in your world and his, is the strongest indicator that he sees you as someone valuable. Many people confuse excitement for love. They confuse butterflies for depth. They confuse effort that appears suddenly for commitment that sustains itself. But excitement dies down. Butterflies calm. Passion takes new shapes. What remains is the man's ability to keep showing up with authenticity. And if he does that without needing applause or validation, you've already glimpsed something very real. Imagine a man who, even after weeks, months, or years, still pays attention to the details you share. Not because he's trying to impress you, but because he genuinely listens. A man who remembers what you said when you were stressed, who checks in when he knows you have an important day, who notices when your energy is different and asks if you're okay, not out of obligation, but because he truly wants to understand you. Every one of these small actions forms a pattern, and patterns reveal truth. He doesn't just love you in moments, he loves you in habits. But consistency also reveals something deeper: intention. When a man is consistent, he is intentionally placing you into the structure of his life. He might still be busy. He might have responsibilities, goals, obligations, but he never uses them as a reason to disconnect. Instead, he communicates. He brings you into the process. He lets you know, "I'm not disappearing, I'm still here." That's what effort looks like in a mature relationship. Not perfect availability, but thoughtful presence. Consistency is not measured by the size of his actions, but by the steadiness of them. It's in the simple routines that become rituals. The way he checks on you, the way he shows care for your well-being, the way he's mindful about your emotions, the way he treats you with respect, even on days when he's stressed or distracted. Those are the moments that tell you who he is in truth, not who he's trying to be temporarily. And there's something important to understand. Consistency is a choice. A man chooses consistency when he believes the connection is worth protecting. He chooses it when he respects you. He chooses it when he sees you as someone he doesn't want to lose. Because inconsistency doesn't come from lack of time, it comes from lack of priority. So when a man continues to show you with his behavior that you are part of his priority list, he's revealing something about his inner world. And that's why consistency becomes so powerful. It becomes a form of communication that is more honest than words. Anyone can say, "I care." Anyone can say, "I'm here for you." But not everyone can demonstrate it 6 months later, during a busy season, during a stressful week, during a moment when life demands more from them. A man's consistency reveals whether his heart is aligned with his words. Sometimes people ask, "How do I know if he really loves me?" And the answer is rarely found in what he says. It's found in what he keeps doing. Does he show up when it matters? Does he stay connected even when things get difficult? Does he maintain the small acts of care even when the initial excitement fades? Does he continue to make space for you in his life? If the answer is yes, you already know more than you think. But consistency also gives you something else, emotional safety. When someone is consistent, you don't have to guess. You don't have to overthink. You don't have to wonder where you stand. You don't have to decode mixed signals. You don't have to chase clarity. His reliability becomes your peace, not because you depend on him for your stability, but because the relationship becomes a place where honesty lives. When a man is consistent, he gives you permission to relax into the connection, to breathe, to trust, to open your heart without worrying that he will vanish when things get real. Because inconsistency creates confusion, but consistency creates trust. And trust is the foundation of love. What makes this even more powerful is that consistent actions don't just show who he is, they show who you can become together. In a consistent relationship, you grow, you evolve, you feel comfortable expressing your needs, you feel freer, because you're not constantly trying to stabilize the relationship. Instead, the relationship stabilizes you. And so, when you observe a man's behavior, look beyond the fireworks. Fireworks are beautiful, but they fade quickly. Look instead at the candle that stays lit, quietly illuminating the space between you, day after day, without demanding attention. That is consistency. And that is love in its purest form. When he shows you consistent care, consistent presence, consistent effort, and consistent emotional engagement, you've already discovered the truth. You don't have to question whether you've got him, because his behavior answers the question for you. When a man begins to let his guard down with you, he is not just showing you another side of himself, he is inviting you into a space he does not offer easily to others. And this is something many people overlook when they try to understand whether his feelings are real. It's easy to be impressed by confidence. It's easy to be drawn to charm, to strength, to ambition. But what truly reveals a man's heart is not what he shows to the world. It's what he allows you to see when no one else is watching. Every man carries an inner world made up of memories, fears, hopes, disappointments, and silent battles. Some of these experiences shape him deeply, some of them harden him, and some of them simply sit quietly within him, unspoken. Most men are taught, directly or indirectly, that vulnerability is a weakness. To reveal too much is to risk too much. To let someone in is to give them the power to hurt you. And because of that, many men move through life with emotional armor, showing confidence but hiding insecurities, showing strength but burying pain, showing humor but suppressing fear. So when he begins to open up to you, when he lets you see not just who he wants to be but who he truly is, that is never random. That is a sign that he trusts you. And trust is not something he gives without thought. Trust is something he gives only when he feels safe, when he feels understood, when he feels seen without judgment. There's a moment in every growing connection where something shifts. At first, conversations are light, playful, filled with curiosity. He wants to know your favorite things, your stories, your passions. But then, at some point, he begins to share not only what he likes but what he fears. Not only where he's going, but what he's unsure about. Not only his dreams, but the things that keep him awake at night. Might be subtle at first, a sentence here, a confession there, a small moment where he says, "I haven't told this to many people." And that sentence reveals everything. Because vulnerability is not about what he shares. It's about who he chooses to share it with. When a man lets his guard down, he is allowing you into the rooms of his mind that he usually keeps locked. He is letting you see the unpolished parts of himself. The parts he doesn't show during first impressions. The parts he doesn't reveal during casual conversations. The parts he protects because they carry weight, history, and sometimes wounds. He might share stories from his childhood, moments that shaped his beliefs about love or loss. He might reveal insecurities he hides behind humor or confidence. He might talk about failures that still sit heavily on him, or doubts he carries about his own worth. And the more he sees that you hold these moments with kindness, the more freely he continues to reveal himself. This is how emotional intimacy builds, not through big declarations, but through quiet honesty. And here's something important to understand. Men don't open up to someone they don't respect. They might share facts, they might talk casually, but deep emotional vulnerability is reserved for someone whose presence feels grounding and whose energy feels safe. Someone who listens without trying to control. Someone who understands without trying to fix. Someone who holds space instead of giving judgment. When a man begins to let his guard down, he is not giving you a puzzle to solve. He is giving you a piece of his soul, and that is never given lightly. He might tell you about mistakes he's made in the past, not to seek approval, but to see whether you can accept a version of him that isn't perfect. He might share fears about the future, testing whether you can hold uncertainty without pulling away. He might confess dreams he keeps hidden because he fears they're too big or too unrealistic. Each one of these moments becomes a quiet declaration, I trust you with the truth. And the truth carries more weight than any romantic gesture ever could. Sometimes, his vulnerability doesn't look like a long emotional conversation. Sometimes it comes through small gestures. A sigh he doesn't hide, a moment he allows himself to be tired, a silence he trusts you with instead of trying to fill. Sometimes vulnerability is in the look he gives you when he can't express something in words. Sometimes it's in the way he lets you comfort him, even if he's used to carrying everything alone. A man's willingness to be vulnerable reflects not only his feelings for you, but his hope in the connection. Because when he reveals himself, he is hoping you won't reject him. He is hoping you won't use his honesty against him. He is hoping you will meet his openness with your own. And when you do, it creates a level of emotional closeness that is rare. There's also another layer to this. When a man feels safe enough to let his guard down, he begins to express emotions he normally restrains. Joy becomes brighter. Affection becomes deeper. Care becomes more present. He becomes more attuned to the connection, more intentional in the way he communicates, more expressive in the way he loves. Vulnerability opens the door to intimacy, and intimacy strengthens everything that follows. This is why you must pay attention, not just to what he shows you, but to what he allows you to see. If he shares his inner world with you, you have stepped into a place he doesn't allow many people to enter. You become someone who matters, not because you demand importance, but because his heart recognizes you as someone he can be real with. And being real is the highest form of connection. When a man lets his guard down, he stops performing. He stops pretending. He stops hiding behind the roles he plays in the world. Instead, he stands before you as a human being, imperfect, hopeful, flawed, capable of love, and deserving of it. And if he gives you that version of himself, it's because something in you has touched him at a level deeper than attraction. So when you see him expressing vulnerability, understand that you're witnessing something sacred. You're witnessing a moment where love becomes possible not because it's loud, but because it's honest. When he lets you into the hidden parts of his heart, you've already begun to understand the depth of his feelings. And when he trusts you with the truth of who he is, you've already got him. There is something incredibly revealing about a man who prioritizes you without you having to ask. It's not about being the center of his universe or expecting him to put aside every responsibility he has. It's about recognizing that you naturally become a part of his thoughts, his plans, and his decisions because he genuinely wants you there. And that difference between someone who includes you out of pressure and someone who includes you out of desire is everything. When a man prioritizes you on his own, it means the connection has shifted from being something he enjoys to something he values. It moves from convenience to importance. And you will feel that shift. You won't need to wonder where you stand. You won't need to decode mixed signals. You won't need to question why the effort has faded after the initial excitement. Because something in his behavior will stay steady, he keeps choosing you. This choice shows up in small ways first. He remembers details you mentioned casually, even the ones you thought he didn't notice. He pays attention to your schedule, your habits, your preferences. He adjusts his communication, not because you demanded it, but because he wants to make the connection easier, smoother, more understood. He checks in, not because he feels obligated, but because he genuinely wants to know how you're doing. These are not dramatic gestures, they are deliberate ones. And intention is what reveals emotional investment. You will notice that you don't have to chase him. You don't have to remind him of your worth. You don't have to beg for time or attention. He offers it freely and consistently because he sees you as someone who matters in his life, and a man naturally makes time for what matters to him, even when he is busy, even when he is tired, even when life is demanding. Time is not about the amount, it's about the willingness. A single mindful moment often carries more sincerity than hours spent with someone who is only half present. What's even more meaningful is that his prioritization doesn't disrupt his life. It aligns with it. He doesn't sacrifice his identity, his goals, or his responsibilities. Instead, he integrates you into his world in a way that feels balanced and intentional. That is how you know it's real. He still pursues his ambitions, but there is now space in those ambitions for you. He still nurtures his friendships, but there is a part of him that remains aware of you throughout the day. You become part of his internal landscape. Not because he's losing himself, but because he sees the relationship as something that enhances him. When a man prioritizes you, it often shows most clearly in how he handles conflict or discomfort. A man who isn't invested will pull away when tension arises. He will distance himself, avoid conversations, or withdraw emotionally. But a man who truly prioritizes you will stay. He will initiate the difficult conversations even when they are uncomfortable. He won't let silence become a barrier. He won't leave issues unresolved just to avoid temporary discomfort. He understands that protecting the connection matters more than protecting his ego. So he listens, he explains, he communicates, he meets you halfway, and this is where you begin to see the deeper psychological truth. Prioritization is not just about giving time, it's about giving energy, giving focus, giving presence. When someone chooses to be emotionally available even during challenges, it means they hold the relationship with care, and care is one of the strongest expressions of love. The beautiful thing is, he doesn't need you to remind him of the effort he should give. His effort becomes natural, an expression of his feelings, not a reaction to your requests. He thinks ahead, he plans with you in mind. If he is making future decisions, big or small, you find yourself included almost instinctively. There is no hesitation. There is no pause where he wonders whether your presence fits. He sees you as part of what he is building. This is why a man's prioritization often shows up in his planning. When he sees you as part of his future, even if it's not explicitly stated, his choices begin to reflect it. He might align his schedule to spend quality time with you. He might share his goals because he imagines your reactions, your support, your perspective. He might consider how his decisions affect you. And this happens not because he is pressured, but because he feels connected to you in a deeper, more meaningful way. When a man doesn't prioritize you, you feel it. You feel the inconsistency, the doubt, the confusion. You feel like you're trying to hold a connection together on your own. But when he does prioritize you, you feel something completely different. You feel stability, you feel seen, you feel chosen, you feel like the relationship is progressing with both of your hands on the wheel, not just yours. There's a quiet ease that comes when a man cares enough to show up without being asked. You don't have to demand the basics because he gives you more than the basics. You don't have to explain your need for effort because he gives effort naturally. You don't have to remind him to consider your feelings because your feelings are already on his mind. That is the difference between someone who likes you and someone who values you. A man who prioritizes you respects your time. He respects your emotional world. He respects the connection. He doesn't create uncertainty where it is unnecessary. He doesn't play with your expectations. He doesn't place you in a position where you need to doubt his intentions. Instead, his behavior gives clarity. His communication gives reassurance. His actions give confidence. This prioritization also shows up in the way he protects the connection, not by isolating you from the world, but by safeguarding the bond from unnecessary misunderstandings. He chooses honesty over convenience. He chooses transparency over games. He chooses communication over silence. And he does this because he sees the relationship as something worth nurturing. There is something remarkably sincere about a man who makes effort look effortless. You can sense when he is not doing things out of duty, but out of genuine affection. You can feel when he uses his time intentionally instead of sparingly. You can tell when your presence brings grounding to his life, not disruption. And when a man reaches this level of emotional maturity, he doesn't just prioritize you. He reveals his readiness for a relationship that grows, deepens, and strengthens with time. That readiness becomes visible in the small, consistent ways he shows up for you. And in the absence of pressure, his sincerity becomes undeniable. A man's priorities reveal his heart far more accurately than his words. When he places you gently, naturally, consistently within the framework of his life, without being reminded to do so, without being pushed, without being tested, then you already have your answer. One of the clearest signs that a man is genuinely falling for you is when he becomes deeply curious about your inner world. Not just your appearance, not just your achievements, not just the image you present to the world, but the mind behind your smile, the heart beneath your words, the emotions that move you, the history that shaped you. When a man is emotionally invested, he doesn't just observe you, he studies you with quiet fascination. And this curiosity is not intrusive. It's gentle, respectful, and rooted in a desire to understand you more fully. It starts with the way he listens. Not the kind of listening where someone waits for their turn to speak, but the kind where your words actually land. He remembers what you say, even when you think it was insignificant. You might mention a story from your childhood, a dream you had once, a fear you've carried for years, or even something as simple as the way you like your coffee. And days, weeks, even months later, he brings it up with perfect clarity. That's not coincidence. That's attention. And attention is one of the strongest expressions of love. Men who are truly invested tend to show it in what they notice. They pick up on patterns. They sense when your energy shifts. They know when something is weighing on your mind, even if you haven't said it out loud. They recognize when you're distracted, when you're tired, when you're hiding something behind a smile. And they ask not to interrogate, not to pry, but because they genuinely want to understand what's happening inside you. This curiosity is one of the most beautiful things in a growing connection because it reflects emotional presence. He's not just participating in conversations, he is absorbing them. He's not just hearing you, he's trying to understand the layers beneath your words. And when a man reaches that depth of attention, it means he's no longer relating to you from the surface, he's beginning to love who you are beneath the surface. He asks questions that go beyond the predictable ones. He wants to know what motivates you, what scares you, what inspires you. He wants to understand the experiences that shaped you, the values you hold close, the boundaries you need, the dreams you've tucked away. And he listens to your answers not as information, but as meaning. To him, every piece of you is something worth learning. What's even more powerful is that his curiosity doesn't have a timeline. It doesn't fade after the initial excitement of getting to know you. It continues. It evolves. As you grow, he becomes curious about your growth. As you heal, he becomes curious about your transformation. As you discover new parts of yourself, he becomes curious about your unfolding. That ongoing curiosity shows that he is emotionally engaged, not just temporarily interested. A man who is curious about your inner world doesn't just want to know how you feel. He wants to understand why. He doesn't just want to know what you like. He wants to understand the experiences that made you like those things. He doesn't just want to know your goals. He wants to understand the purpose behind them. This depth of understanding creates a connection that feels safe, intimate, and meaningful. And the reason this matters so much is because curiosity is the foundation of empathy. When he understands your inner world, he becomes more thoughtful with his actions. He becomes more careful with his words. He becomes more intentional with how he shows up for you. He knows how to support you because he understands what support actually means to you. He knows how to comfort you because he understands what comfort feels like for you. He knows how to love you because he understands the love language that resonates with your heart. This kind of emotional attunement is rare because it requires presence, it requires patience, it requires emotional maturity. Many people can be attracted to your beauty, your charm, your success, but only someone who truly cares will want to understand the private world behind those things. You'll notice this curiosity even in the smallest interactions. When you talk about something that excites you, he leans in, not just physically, but emotionally. When you share something vulnerable, he doesn't dismiss it, he doesn't minimize it, he doesn't rush past it. He holds it with respect. He asks follow-up questions that show he really wants to understand your perspective. He tries to see the world from your eyes, not because he's trying to agree with everything you say, but because he values the way you experience life. A man who is deeply curious about you will also reveal curiosity even in your silences. He can sense when something is unspoken. He knows when you're quiet because you're processing something. He knows when you're holding back because you're unsure, and instead of forcing you to talk, he creates space for you to feel safe enough to share. That gentle patience is another form of love. Sometimes his curiosity shows up in the questions he asks about your day. Not the polite "how was your day?" but the kind of questions that invite depth. He wants to know what challenged you. He wants to know what made you smile. He wants to know what frustrated you, what drained you, what lifted you. He wants to know the emotional texture of your experiences, not just the events themselves. This kind of curiosity creates emotional intimacy, and emotional intimacy is what strengthens a relationship more than anything else. Because when two people understand each other's inner worlds, misunderstandings reduce, communication deepens, and trust becomes unshakable. You no longer feel the need to hide parts of yourself because you know he genuinely wants to see them. Curiosity also shows that he values who you are, not just what you can offer. He's not just interested in the role you play in his life. He's interested in your individual journey. He wants to know how you think, how you process emotions, how you see the world. And the more he learns, the more he appreciates the depth of who you are. What's even more meaningful is that a man who is curious about your inner world often becomes inspired by it. He begins to admire your resilience, your intelligence, your emotional awareness. He learns from your perspectives, your values, your experiences. And this mutual exchange creates a dynamic where both people grow, not just individually but together. Curiosity becomes a bridge between two hearts. It allows him to step into your emotional landscape, and it allows you to feel understood without needing to explain yourself repeatedly. It softens you, it opens you, and it makes the connection feel profoundly grounded. This is why it's so important to notice the way a man pays attention. Not the intensity of his affection, but the depth of his understanding. Not the loudness of his gestures, but the sincerity of his interest. Because someone who is curious about who you are on the inside is someone who sees you not as an idea, not as a fantasy, not as a temporary excitement, but as a whole human being worth knowing. And when a man commits himself to understanding you, not just loving you, but understanding you, that's when you can feel the truth of his intentions. That's when connection becomes deeper than attraction. That's when emotional safety begins to grow. That's when his presence in your life begins to feel like something real. And when he is curious about your inner world with patience, sincerity, and genuine attention, you've already got him.